When people talk about gateway anime, they usually mention titles such as Naruto or Dragon Ball Z, because they were heavily accessible and told stories that were very appealing to teenagers. Me, on the other hand, I grew up with Voltron in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it was very sparse until I really started getting into it, maybe like Ronin Warriors, and that was it. And I remember specifically, I was like 19 or 20 years old, laying on my bed watching some anime on TV. It was like Fooly Cooly, Full Metal Alchemist, and Inuyasha. I thought it was cool because I was finally being able to see anime on TV, because that was like when I first got cable, basically, when I could pay for it myself. So I remember watching that. I saw Cowboy Bebop, and it instantly gripped me like nothing else did, because it treated me like an adult. I really loved it, and even though my schedule, I couldn't really watch anime, I couldn't really watch those shows all the time, I had no understanding of plot, I stuck with them until the end. And if it wasn't for watching Cowboy Bebop or Samurai X Trust and Betrayal, then I would have probably overlooked anime as a whole, just as being another form of cartoons for teenagers and kids. Cowboy Bebop is set in 2071 as humans have colonized the majority of our solar system, and because of this, it's a lot harder to catch crime, and as a result, law enforcement shares their information with cowboys, or bounty hunters. Our story follows the ragtag group of cowboys aboard the aptly named spaceship Bebop. This is not your average cops and robbers, good versus evil story. Bebop's narrative follows 4 protagonists who, most of them have their own goals, and their goals are not the main focus of the story. Bebop mostly focuses on characterization and atmosphere, as these characters have their past lives that they've left behind and never want to talk about again. It's up to us, the viewer, to watch and learn about them as we see the mystery of their history unfold. Moving on to our wonderful cast of characters, we have Spike Spiegel, who's a cowboy that plays by his own rules, and usually he pays for that in the end, and even if he does complete a mission, most of the money is spent on repairs where he wrecked everything in the process. We have Jet Black, another cowboy who is the most rational and mature person aboard the Bebop when everybody else is just acting selfishly and irrational. We have Faye Valentine, a girl who is almost as hot-headed as Spike Spiegel himself, but she has a lot less respect for anyone else than he does. Although she is a bounty hunter with him, she has a bounty of her own stemming from her personal debt, which is massive. And lastly, there's Edward Wong Howe Pepelu Trevusky IV. We call her Ed. She, or he, despite her androgynous appearance, is actually a very cute little girl who is a computer hacker whose personality is, I would say, almost alien, because she doesn't act like any human I've ever seen. The dynamic between these characters is really the major reason to watch the show, as it appears that they recreate a dysfunctional family aboard the Bebop. Spike and Jet, they fight like brothers, they have this level of respect for each other, and even though they argue a lot, it never really gets too personal between them. It appears to change nothing as Faye is added into the fold, as she seems to cause more problems than she solves. Although they're at odds with each other more times than not, they still manage to find a way to sit down and have dinner with each other at the end of each day. It's apparent that these characters know next to nothing about the history of their shipmates, as there are times when arguments will be brought up that really strike a nerve with what we know about these characters' backstory. This can be pretty depressing at times, because you have other anime that really push the message of friendship and teamwork, and then you have Cowboy Bebop, which everyone has this very pessimistic outlook, and yes, they are starving themselves half the time because they can't afford to eat, but they all have their own history, and because it's their history, it's their story, it's their fight, and they must fight it alone, so they really don't want to include anybody else or tell them anything else about their life, so it really feels like they're living in this really cold and basically bleak world where they have to build up these walls around their emotions to protect themselves. Although Bebop has a lot of heavy-hitting emotional moments, it does a great job of balancing itself out with comedy. We have characters such as Ed, who's obviously a comedic relief character, and we have the multi-layered Spike Spiegel, where one of his layers is that he's a funny guy, and even though his story takes a darker turn halfway through the anime, he still remains true to his personality and is funny from time to time, despite the fact that he doesn't need to fit that role anymore. Despite the ever-changing nature of the show, there is one constant, which is they are broke and they need to eat, so you might think that the point of the show is for them to catch criminals and cash in on them, but it's not, as they mostly fail all of their missions, usually in hilariously ironic ways. For a crew that's pretty broke and makes little to no money, they live pretty well considering the cost of fuel, repairs, and food, even though they don't eat like kings, as we see their trademark meal, bell peppers and beef. The beef is a lie. The beef is a lie. How come that never caught on as an internet meme? We have the cake is a lie from Portal. Oh yeah, this did come out in 1998. While Bebop is partially episodic, it does a great job of stringing together a coherent story, and its world building explains things such as history, technology, and even criminal organizations, which serve to not only tie characters into the world that they're living within, but also to each other on occasion. In addition, the amount of detail present within their universe, it feels as if you have these living cities, or living planets actually, and these characters that are present within these one-off episodes. They're only around for one episode, but that's all that they need with the amount of detail that is given, because they have their own small little story within that one episode. They have their history, they have their personality, and they have some form of conclusion to the story that's present just for one episode. Two of my favorite episodic characters were VT and Andy. Andy, of course, was just a comic relief character that I really enjoyed, not only because he was a funny guy, but because he had the same voice actor as Dark Schneider from Bastard. When talking about great stories, all of their components are important within their own right. To me, characters are more important than plot, and characterization is more important than character development. Despite its importance, I would never say that characterization is the main point of a show, but with Bebop, it kinda is. The majority of time spent within Cowboy Bebop is watching these characters interact with each other as we're learning about their personality. This goes for the main characters as well as the side characters, and characters that we see once and never again. I'd almost say that these aspects of characterization and character interaction are more important to the story of Bebop as a whole than the conclusion itself. And for the sake of Bebop, when I say conclusion, I don't mean the ending of the anime, but the conclusion of all of the characters' individual stories. Bebop is a hard show to pin down in terms of genre just because of how it changes its nature depending on what episode we're seeing here. So if I were to have to choose, I would say that Bebop is mostly a sci-fi drama with elements of comedy, but it is really all over the board and it's hard to pin down. And it doesn't have an identity crisis either, like many other anime that try and do too many things, but it finds a way to blend it all in very well. I find that many people get the first impression of Bebop that it's going to be a very drama and action heavy series just by the way that the trailer looks, and I would say that while Bebop does a great job of portraying these genres, there is much more at play here than just those two. So don't come into Bebop expecting it to be an action heavy series. Don't get thrown off when you see a lot of comedy or episodes that are totally devoted to comedy, because the story is not just about those things, despite the fact that the trailers make it seem like it is. I'm not going to give you any spoilers right now, but I need to talk about the ending for a second, or else it would be a pretty weird review if I didn't. Cowboy Bebop, as you may or may not know, is an anime original. That means that it is the true canon. There's no story that predates it in another medium, so you can expect to have a complete ending, and that's what you get with this. I can't tell you anything more about the ending because it's something that you just can't say a lot about, but I will tell you that it is one of my top 5 most memorable moments in all of anime. And I've seen a lot of anime. Bebop was one of the last in a dying breed of hand-drawn animation, and it was absolutely beautiful. I love the hand-drawn animation, but even on a technical standpoint, they did everything very well. They put a lot of detail into the backgrounds and their surroundings. They added a lot of details in the characters' emotions, their faces, their clothing, their movements were very fluid. The fluidity of its animation really stands on par with the anime of today when it's computer animated and it's a lot easier to do things. There's also, because this was so close to the 2000s, there is some very primitive CGI work, but it's minimal at best, and it's something that is far in the background. Music is very important to Cowboy Bebop, and honestly, I'm not that big of a music junkie. There are references here that I know simply from looking on Wikipedia and reading things. Like, for example, all of the episode names are actually song names, and we also have a lot of influence from music as well, like Bebop itself, the term bebop is actually a form of jazz, or a word for jazz. The soundtrack itself is all over the place, containing many different genres of music. We have the jazz, we have some blues, which are kind of like a derivative of jazz, actually, now that I think about it, but we also have some rock as well. It's really all over the place, and I absolutely loved it. It would probably be my number 2 favorite anime soundtrack of all time, only topped by Berserk, because let's face it, the Berserk soundtrack is awesome. As for the voice acting, as an anime reviewer of many years now, it's kind of weird to say this, but I've only watched the English dub to this. I've never even tried to watch the Japanese audio. I've seen it in clips on YouTube, and it looks to be done pretty well, but this has to be one of the greatest English dubs of all time, and if something has such a strong presence within your native language, there's nothing wrong with watching it that way. So if you want to watch Bebop with dub or sub, I guess English dub, I haven't really tried it in other languages, but you're free to try it either way because the English dub is beautiful. As for my final scores, I give Cowboy Bebop a performance level of 9.2 and an enjoyment level of a 10. I have no problems with saying that Cowboy Bebop is one of the saviors of anime. Everyone needs to watch it at least once, and directors of modern anime need to watch it 5 or 6 times and take notes because they really need it. Despite the fact that Cowboy Bebop is one of the most popular anime of all time, and I'm fairly sure that everyone in my audience has already seen it, I decided to make this review spoiler-free for people that are just getting into anime and for people who have never really given anime a chance. So if you know someone that is just getting into anime, they're curious about it, or they were always skeptical and never really wanted anything to do with it, show them this review. Maybe it could change their perspective on an entire medium. And of course, as always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, as well as comment, rate it, and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for next time when I review Yu Yu Hakusho 2 days from now. Thanks for watching.